So before the break, you had a chance to investigate people's symbolic realities, right? With the unconscious mind, how it symbolizes the highs and lows of life, shall we say.
And we'd like to give you some more questions, some more ways of extending that.
But to make it more fun, rather than just focusing on a specific life issue the person's had or an event like that, let's just use some training wheels we had back on day one, just for fun of it. And do you remember that strange new world exercise we did, spinning people around and a whole new world comes out? We'd like to play with that a little bit. To do that, we will need you to, of course, move all the chairs to one side again. So if we begin with that, then we'll introduce you to the exercise right after that. Okay, guys? So let's move the chairs to one side.
So you remember the exercise, right? You find a partner, you spin round, and you're all really fluid already right now in doing this exercise. You've done it before a number of different times, and when you open your eyes, you can look around and you can start creating this whole landscape. Now, how do you help people to develop that if, you know, that they haven't had a nice creative warm-up? These questions are kind of a variation on something called clean language. Has anyone heard of clean language? Okay, great. It's a therapy model based on the work of a guy called David Grove. And it's very, very much about exploring people's symbolic landscape. But that symbolic landscape that represents their problems is also their creative symbolic landscape. And by asking the right kinds of questions, you can... oh, where's it gone? Haha. You can help them to step through and around in that model of the world. So go and find a partner, 2 minutes apiece to begin with. One of you spins round, the other is the coach. I'd like you to take them through these kinds of questions. Actually, you can just start off with what's that like? What do you see? Is there anything else there? Where are they standing? What's to their left? What's to their right? What's right in front of them? What's behind them? What happens next? You're exploring the dimensions of space and time in which they move in their symbolic landscape. And what you'll find is that asking those questions, what's before, what happens next, starts to pull out the elements of the story and introduces different elements. So, on your marks, get set, go!
So was that fun? Right? Old stuff, getting yourself all pepped up, good. So let's do something interesting. As an experiment, what I'd like you to do is to find a new partner. That's an easy thing to do, which means you have at least 2 more tasks. The second thing I want you to do is have a little chat with them about some wonderful moment in their life, some happy event, some positive event, that sort of thing, some victory, something that makes them feel proud, etc. You get the idea? Just talk about that. You can be as simple as, so what makes you feel proud? Or when was the last time something really interesting happened to you or something really positive happened to you? And all I want you to do is chat about that, just normal social chit-chat sort of stuff, for about a minute or 2. You may hear some of these symbol signs come out. If you do, then just note them. There's nothing you need to do with it right now. Once you've talked for about a minute or so, what I want you to do is then say, great, let me just stop you there a second. Now, spin around and see a world, a strange new world you've never seen before, start describing it, and use these questions to populate it, to bring it to life, right? So you're just going to have normal chit-chat about something positive, then you'll do the same exercise again, and just notice what happens, and you'll switch around, and we'll come back and talk about that. Sound good? Different partner. Take 4 minutes apiece, off you go. How did that go for you guys? Was that interesting? How did the first and the second exercises compare to each other? The first, just a strange new world, and the second one where you talked about something very positive first. Were there any noticeable differences there? Over here? That's it, race each other, run, rabbit, run.
It was much more involved.
The second one was much more involved,
yeah,
right?
More fun, and I got the feeling that she was really feeling and experiencing this.
And those...
having fun with it.
Right, she's having fun with it, she's really feeling it. Can I ask you, in terms of the experience you talked beforehand, we don't need to know what it was there a similar emotion in the positive experience to the ones that she was experiencing later on in the Strange New World?
Yeah, it was similar, but the second one was much more intense.
Absolutely, and that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Right, thank you for that. Who else wants to share a little bit over here in the back?
Second time around, I ended up in an amusement park.
Oh, very nice.
Still just a teeny bit nauseous.
Thank you.
Very good, I think. Okay. Anyone else? All right, so much for the interactive part. So here's one of the reasons we want to start doing this. You probably noticed that like you said, did you in general notice that the second set of Strange New Worlds were overall more engaging, more emotional, more vivid to people? Would that be fair to say? The reason for that is because they've been primed ahead of time by talking about some positive event. It starts accessing all the memories and all the associations with that, including symbols. So you'll probably find that within the Strange New World that popped out of nowhere was actually very relevant to the symbolic elements that relate to the positive experience that we're talking about, and so on. You get the idea? Hence, the emotions were stronger because a lot more stuff was happening. So I think what we're going to talk a little bit about is the kinds of metaphors to look out for, the kinds of similes that people come out with, because you'll be able to hear them happening. There's some patterns that repeat very frequently. Would you like to take that,
Certainly. Some people found themselves, face to face with a brick wall. This is a common one. Obstacles. You'll hear various metaphors come up because they are universal. So, and if you think about that, if you've got an obstacle right in front of you, then it's really difficult to move forward in life, isn't it? You might find that you're pushing and pushing against things and not making any progress. You might be banging your head against a brick wall. You might not be able to get over it. But maybe you need to explore what's underneath that, or find a way round it. Another common one that people come up with is edges. It's like I'm on the edge of a cliff. Again, they can't move forward. It feels like they're looking down at people. Or they're above people. Pedestals is another one. They find they're standing on a pedestal. So everyone's looking up at them. They're looking down at everyone else. They still can't move forward unless they just step down from the pedestal and come down to earth. Containers. I'm depressed. People who are depressed are often, they're in a pit of despair. They're in a pit. So what's it like when you're in a pit? Again, it's probably dark down there. You're sick of looking up at everyone around you. Maybe you feel like you can't move in any direction. You're walking around in circles. You really just need to climb out. But who's gonna help you get a leg up? Who's gonna pull you out? Do you understand? Yes. Does anyone not understand? No. Great. So there are certain kinds of metaphors that you'll find. Containers, by the way, we can also be containers. I'm full of sadness. He's full of joy. And what kind of container is that? He's just letting off steam. When you find these key metaphors that people are using about where they are, I'm stuck. Again, if somebody's stuck, It might be because they're on a pedestal. It might be because they're moving through treacle. You need to find out enough about that particular stuckness. Because, when they've considered all the options, there'll be some that are left. And to move, they might not be able to move forward, but perhaps they can take the right path to a solution. When you begin to understand somebody's symbolic environment in that way, you can begin to co-opt their experience. Like, to give you an example, I was doing this exercise on myself recently, and it was like I was in a cave. And that cave was halfway up a cliff. So sometimes in that cave, it's difficult to see. It's dark in there. You've got the kind of the pressure of the rocks bearing down on you. If you go to the edge of the cliff, of the cave, you can actually see forward. I can see the sun in front. I can see the wonderful world in front of me. But I can't move towards it because I'm on edge. So again, I have to either climb down to earth and just join everyone else. But maybe as I climb down, I also need to grow up so I can still see what's ahead of me, the bright future ahead of me. If you're in a pit of despair, quite often that's a good one. People don't climb out of a pit. They grow up and up and up out of it. So the whole purpose of this little section is just to, and we can only cover it very briefly, is to just start to tune your ears to listen out for these kind of metaphors. Because once you've found them, you can co-opt them and effectively mind read a whole part of their life. Do you understand that? And as you begin to explore, as we've already kind of touched on earlier, there are a whole set of metaphors that we use about the organizations that we work in, about the countries and the towns that we live in, about life, about what is our life like, what is life like? Is it a battle? Is it a garden?
Or a box of chocolates.
Is it a box of chocolates? Is it a game?
And just to add something here, the interesting thing is every group or subculture tends to have one or a handful of similar metaphors or symbols that they operate by. And this will be of importance to you if there's a particular group you wish to influence. Your customers, for example, if your children, for example, in an area, they will all have similar metaphors. They pick them up from each other, from the language, from the way that they talk about each other's frustrations and so on. And to the extent you can get a sense of what your subculture's metaphors are, you'll have a much stronger line into A, understanding how they behave or how they feel and why they act certain ways. And secondly, B, to create the kind of stories that fit them, that either take them out of this dark hole or actually use the dark hole as the starting point for whatever influence you need to have in that place. Does that kind of make sense to you guys?
Let me give you an example of how powerful this can be. I worked with a company, new media technology company, who were involved. They were trying to engage their supply chain because they understood that if they got everyone in the room together, basically engaged their supply chain more, shared their market research, their ideas of where they were going forward, found out what the suppliers' plans for the future were, they would be able to coordinate their activities a lot better and kind of anticipate what was coming up and eliminate a whole load of wasted effort. And they'd been doing this for about 6 months to 8 months, and they kept sending out emails inviting their supply chain, their suppliers, along to meetings. And they were just getting hardly any response at all. A couple of people were turning up, but they weren't getting it. they changed 2 words. They changed supply chain to delivery partner. The metaphor, the way they explained to me what the change was the supply chain is like this. People are handing things on and moving like this, and it's very much being led by what's needed at the end there. And the person over here is really far away from there. With that one change of expression, delivery partners, the delivery, they were all suddenly handing, it was like they were standing in a circle, delivering what they were producing to their customer, to the end customer. So they were all a lot closer together. They were partners. And their intention, their outcome, was focused on the end customer and how their relationship supported that. And it worked completely. Within another 4 months, they'd built up enough of a momentum there that all the other suppliers who were still hesitating knew they had to get on board now. Is that clear?
There's another example from, I believe it was General Motors. Mm-hmm. So some years ago, it could have been like in the, was it 60s or 70s? Can't remember now.
Yeah.
General Motors seems to be going through periods of struggle quite often. And in this particular instance, there was a congressional hearing, some kind of hearing, where basically it's a very unpopular thing. They're going to ask for a bailout, some money to help them out. And it was a politically hot potato, so people were about to say, no more bailouts, you sink or swim on your own. That was really the general attitude of the day. And so the CEO or CFO, I can't remember who it was now, he rocks up to this hearing, and really it's supposed to be a massacre because they've already made up their mind. But instead of talking about a bailout or a handout to help them, struggling to get through and so on, he just changed the metaphor. He said, this is not a bailout. This is a, what's it called? A safety parachute, was that? Or a safety net? A safety net.
Yeah.
It's just a safety net. And just by switching those 2 words around, from bailout to safety net, everyone went, oh, that's all right. We can give them a safety net. Yeah, that makes sense. And we're talking about, at the time, $1 billion investments, which are, I guess now would be equivalent of $1 trillion, I don't know. But we're talking about a lot of money being handed out because the metaphor changed. So begin to appreciate a little bit of why we spend so much time doing this here right now. Because if you do want to influence others, whether it's therapeutically, business-wise, socially, and so on, if you do not appreciate the metaphors from which they're operating unconsciously, they themselves don't know. Notice how we started the exercise quite harshly this morning, and it was difficult, wasn't it? And now it's getting easier because you get more of a sense of what you're trying to do with this, but consciously we're not used to thinking in these ways, and yet unconsciously it's still happening anyways. And to the extent you can get at the symbolic level, understand where they're operating from, you can have a sense of, okay, do we co-opt the story that they're telling and then just introduce characters that fit? Or do you help them transform the story that they're telling so that a better metaphor emerges that will help them more and, of course, serve you more as well?
In order to kind of just illustrate this further and kind of give you some examples, we're just going to run quickly through some of the simple images we've come across in organizations. There's actually a book called Images of Organizations by Gareth Morgan, I think his name is. It's a very handy book. It's a bit out of date now, but it's still very useful for the insights it gives. And my work as a consultant, basically, working for companies. And when you go in there, one of the first things that we look to establish is, because often we're going in as part of a change management program. People are there's always a change going on. Somebody's buying somebody, some merger is happening, some market is changing. They have to find something for all these managers to do, basically. Oh, am I cynical? Am I being cynical? Oh, really? Sorry about that, guys. So one of the most common metaphors that we find is it's that change occurs because we tell you what's going to happen. We're going to tell you what's going to happen.
Lay down the law.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Yeah. There's two ways we can go with that. Mm-hmm. There's the law, and there's, it's command and control, basically. Yep. It's rules, regulations, command and control, often military metaphors. So in that kind of organization, you'll find battle, fight. People are going to work with their armor on, and they're coming home at the end of the day bruised and battered.
And they'll look for ways to attack whatever's coming, because otherwise they'll want to get their preemptive attack in. Otherwise they feel they'll be attacked. Their position gets weakened.
And unfortunately, because of the way organizations work, often they're involved in friendly fire skirmishes going off all the time.
Do you see how these things will naturally evolve? Anyone here work at sort of a managerial, senior managerial level, or been in that sense? This is not uncommon, is it? These metaphors actually get literally talked out like that. You don't even have to search for them. They get thrust upon you.
The second most common metaphor we come across is it's a marketplace. We're going to sell the change. We have to get our employees to buy into this new way of working together. They might give you a menu of choices. But it's still actually very much a top-down approach there. There's a central supplier of items for the marketplace. And the metaphor is all about this buy-in. How do we message them? How do we brand this change effectively? Another frequent metaphor is, we're going to roll out some ideas, but we're going to test them first. This is the organization as the science project or experiment. It's the science. It's coming towards the machine metaphor. This is a system that we can understand. We're going to test. We're going to gather results. We're going to do some experiments. It's still very much a top-down approach. And when you get into the whole scientific worldview of an organization, it'll be about, it's optimizing performance.
Now, if you think about some of these metaphors you've heard so far, now just think about the two different positions. You have the management structure on one end, and we have the employee structure at the other end. How do the managers feel? Well, I'm in control. Right? I'm the experimenter, you're my lab rat. Essentially, that's the idea, isn't it? Or, I'm the vendor, and the only place you can buy is from me, so it's red, red, or red. Which one do you want, right? Or it's I'm the commander. Do as you're told, or you'll be fired, right? How do you think the lab rats feel about that? They're going to be really enthusiastic about the change that's going to come, aren't they? Oh, great! We get to choose between red and red again. Yay! So begin to see how misunderstanding the symbolic landscape can create all kinds of issues. And of course, the manager's going like, I don't understand this. We're selling them change. It's good stuff. Of course it is if you're the one with the goods. If you're the one running the experiment, it's great, You put we should do that sometime, right? Go into university, get all the experimenters, stick them in a maze, make them hunt the cheese. Not so much fun then, is it? So it's important that you understand what these symbols are implying for everyone involved, because you can probably predict all kinds of problems that will arise, and also all kinds of places where influence will be easy based on that particular model, right? Did you want to share some more, or shall we?
Yes, certainly. As a consultant going into an organization, what am I doing? I'm consulting. I'm having a consultation. What am I, a doctor? Is the organization my patient? I'm the expert still. Still, it's top-down approach. I'm the expert. And I'm going in and I'm consulting with people. I'm asking them what they think. They're telling me their problems. I'm going away and I'm creating a solution. I can fix this. The way we always tried to work was, because we're a big bunch of hippies, was co-creation. Because consultation, ultimately, what you end up doing is you go in there, you ask the questions, you gather the information, then you go back to the center, and then you move to either tell, sell, or test mode. Co-creation, it's more, what is it? It's more like a
village.
A village working together.
You heard the expression, the global village? That's because the big players are going, oh, well, you're the CEO and I'm a CEO. Well, I can't look down on you because they'll be looking down on me. So we're part of a global village.
That's right, yeah.
We work together. But of course, with our village, not the lab rats. Do you understand how a lot of the issues can start coming out this way?
Think some very simple, obvious ones. Organizations as machines. You know, in that kind of situation, it's easy to throw a spanner in the works. Or for those non-English speakers, a wrench in the machine. Some of those organizations will be, you know, well-oiled.
Some will get a little rusty.
They you know, this machine, we only really need to tinker with it a little bit, and it'll run fine for ages. It's running smoothly. Why change things? Organizations can also be creatures, organisms. You know, there's the head and the heart, the kidneys, the liver. They'll all be mapped onto different parts of the organization. And let's come up with one more. Brains, that's another one. Organizations as brains. Interconnected networks of neurons cooperating with each other. I'm just going to give you that's a little image, a little insight to get you noticing.
So, for those of you thinking, well, what this has to do with me, I don't work in an organization, I have no desire to. It's just a very simple way of looking at any collection or any group of people that identify with each other, right? If you're working with troubled teenagers, they're going to have their own symbols, right? There might be the Lost Boys. There might be the Rejects. If you're working with, let's say, I know a lot of you hypnotherapists, so your community that you're serving, you know, if it's blue-collar workers or white-collar workers, if it's very affluent or middle class, each one of those areas will have a different mindset, a different set of symbols that they aspire to. You already know this, right? In America, they keep talking about, oh, this is an Italian community or an African-American community. What they're really saying is there are certain metaphors and symbols that these people believe in that will shape the story of their lives and your interactions with them. If you want to influence those people, understanding what those are will be very useful, and having a tool to get what those symbols are will help you. So, for example, if you were to just chat with the clients that you have or the people you want to influence, and you talk to enough people, you'll notice that there is a general pattern. There's a lot of people who run similar things, right? Now, to use, for example, the military metaphor, some will see it more as a struggle, some will see it about being in control, some will see it more about, authority figures. But really, they're saying the same thing, just from a slightly different point of view. And by understanding that, you will be able to influence them and do something with your stories to help along with that too. You get the idea? Useful stuff? Yeah? Shall we do something practical with it? So let's do an exercise. Let's do this in pairs, and just talk to the to your partner in the same way we did this morning about a particular issue that you could help them with. Let's orient them towards something. You can role play this if you like. So, for example, if what kind of people do you guys want to influence? Just give me some ideas so we can actually use something that fits your metaphor, right? So can we have some mics, please, guys? So we have Pamela in the back here. Just want to go Pamela in the back. So let's just grab some of your the kind of people you need to influence, so you get an idea of what we're talking about, and then we'll start pulling out the symbols so we can start using them practically in a moment. Okay? Go ahead.
My French in-laws.
Mm-hmm. So your in-laws who happen to be French, right? So if anyone here knows the French very well, you can start role-playing them, or you could even role-play them for them, because you'll have some instincts about how they think that actually not a very useful way of doing it. Mm-hmm. You might actually want to be your in-laws and have someone else pull the metaphors out so you can see them, because you'll have a lot of instincts about them, right? What other kind of groups of people might you want to influence?
People that need help with chronic pain.
So people in chronic pain, okay. So what kind of area are you?
In my case, it'll be pain for sickle cell anemia.
So people with a sickle cell anemia, so with a
which creates a lot of pain around the body.
Sure, so with a disease, with a certain condition, and there'll be some ideas around that, right? Who else has a specific idea in mind? Over here, please.
Michelle, is it?
Stefan, sorry.
Colleagues, co-workers.
Say again? Colleagues and co-workers at your place of work. Fantastic. You can look out for a lot of the metaphors you've already heard, because they'll be in there somewhere probably. Anyone else? Well, you get the general idea of what we're talking about here, right? Hugo?
Just teenagers.
Teenagers, right? Yeah, everyone's kind of like, oh
it's
yeah.
The last boy,
yeah.
The Lord of the Flies.
Exactly. So I think the easiest way to do this exercise, and actually might be quite a fun way of doing it, is to reverse roles. If you play the audience you want to influence, right? Have your partner then talk to you about what's it like and all this sort of stuff, and see if you can kind of map it out around you, like, well, it's like there's a hole here, and there's a wall there, and there's a gun over here, and all together I'm really in a bad place, right? Have them pull it out, because you know those people already. You've already talked to them, you have some instincts about it. So chances are you already know more about their symbols and metaphors than you realize. So this might be a nice, useful way for you to get at that. What we're looking for is, you don't have to get the whole story right out. You're just going to have enough that we can use it usefully when we get back to the idea of storytelling. Do you understand the idea of the exercise, everyone?
You're looking for their Weltanschauung.
Their Weltanschauung, yes. So let's take, what do you reckon, 5 minutes apiece? So you'll really have a go at this?
Yeah, sure.
Take 5 minutes apiece, so 10 minutes in total. Really think about a context where you want to be influential, and then place someone that you already know who is in that context so that you can let those symbols emerge in a relatively close proximity to reality. All right, guys? Off you go. All right, so first of all, are you beginning to have more fun now playing with these symbols? I know it's a bit of a slower start this morning, but you're getting into this whole gear a bit. Judging by the volume of the room, some bigger stuff's coming out now, right? Did anyone surprise himself that we were kind of channeling the group, you know, either teenagers or colleagues and so on, and somebody going like, yeah, this is probably what they'd say, and stuff starts coming out, and you're almost a little bit surprised by that. Would that be fair to say? Mm-hmm. So what kind of groups and what kind of symbols did you guys discover just now? Over to you. Interactive element. Hands raising would be useful. There you go. These gentlemen over here. We'll come with Arthur over here. Go ahead.
I didn't particularly discover any symbols, but what I did was I wanted to see how could I influence my employees better, and so we got down on one group of employees, and as I began to think what they had to go through, put myself in their place, I was thinking, boy, they really do have a hard job.
It's useful to understand that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were one of your employees, one of your nurses, say, what would that be like?
There's a lot that's going on. There's a lot of responsibility. People are coming at you from every different direction.
Right. So when there's lots of stuff going on and there's lots of responsibility, lots of different directions going on.
People are coming at you from every direction.
Yeah. What's that like? What else is that like?
Pressure cooker.
It's like a pressure cooker, isn't it?
Okay.
It's like a pressure cooker, and the pressure just mounts over the course of the day, right?
Yeah.
And unless they need some way of releasing that, it might explode.
Yeah.
It's probably a good idea if sometimes they get to let off steam a little.
Not in the office.
Well, you do realize, and here comes the reframe, you do realize that steam drives steam engines. And that's one of the ways, and you see, if you get a nice shot of Arthur's face, I'm like, oh, there's locks I didn't even know I had tumbling into place right now. And it's not a complete intervention right now, is it? No. But it's just a great big door. It's kind of like, explain further. Well, let me illustrate with a story. And suddenly, we're into the transformational story or the teaching tale, aren't we? Do you see how useful this stuff can be now? Just a very simple snapshot can take someone from, no, they can't explode in the office, through, oh, maybe I can harness that energy to be something useful. But I could tell that to him logically and say, yes, let's take all their pent-up frustrations and harness it to something useful and productive in the office. And he's going to go, are you crazy? Are you nuts? As opposed to now thinking, yeah, how could I harness the pressure that's building up? Do you understand the value of this now, right? We haven't even got into how to build this into your stories yet. We just want you to go to lunch with an appreciation that you actually have a very potent tool here when applied with a little bit of wisdom. So thank you for doing that, Arthur. I appreciate that. There's another hand over here, so we'll go over here first. Go ahead.
All right. I was thinking about a potential client of mine who would not really believe that hypnosis would help him.
Right.
So it was like being in a crowd watching a magician on stage, and suddenly everything falls apart and he becomes ridiculed.
The magician becomes ridiculous.
Yep.
And would you be the magician for this
Client.
For this client? Great. So again, there are many ways you can play with that, right? And say, well, what makes you think this is not a comedy magician? Right?
All right.
Would you not be entertained? So really, as long as you're entertained, does it matter whether or not you see through the trick? Again, do you see how they're giving you a reframe there? And another version might be, so why on earth are you coming to see a magician if you don't think the trick will work? If you expect it to fall apart?
All right.
And I'll tell you more about the metaphor, right? So again, I'm not giving you solutions as much as giving you some food for thought about the metaphors that you discovered, the symbols you discovered, right? So do you want to pass it on? I think Manuel's here. Right in front, there you go.
Yeah, I was thinking about trying to influence a lawyer on how to solve the underlying disputes by the help of a mediator or using negotiation techniques.
Great.
Instead of just going through the legal motions.
Sure.
And when we spoke, I got the feeling this is a big box I'm carrying, and people try to steal stuff out of my box. It doesn't feel very well.
So it's almost like a kid, and I've got my toys in it. Don't take my toys.
Exactly. And then the next thing, Ole here asked the question, well, what if you want to change the content? How would you do that? And then my solution was, well, actually, I can become a mediator myself, and let's make a legal profession out of it. And actually, that's what's happening in real life. It was very insightful.
Right. So now you understand. I mean, of course, the more people you talk to in terms of the legal field, the more you'll understand what the global metaphor is. But you now have some ideas, and people are doing this constantly. Great salespeople are constantly talking in symbols and metaphors. Sometimes they impose their own, but the wise ones just understand the ones that everyone else is thinking about. Look, it's probably like, think of a child with a pox, they're protecting all their toys and so on. But after a while, it's the same old toy. It gets boring. How about figuring out how you can change these toys and get a brand new set of toys in there so that it's like every day is like Christmas? So I've just changed. Have you heard me change the metaphor? I've gone from a kid being possessive about toys to Christmas, which is about receiving more. And of course, the underlying implication being, just because we might as well spell it out, that there are ways to get more business by doing something where you think you might get less. Are you beginning to see some value here, folks? Anyone else want to share theirs, or shall we, over here, please? Just pass to the side. Oh, okay, if you grab it, we'll come to you. Can we have a mic over here, please, as well? Martin, have you the other one? Or the other one already? Oh, there you go. Okay. So we'll start with you because you had it first, then we'll come to you, and then we'll come over here. Go ahead.
I found the metaphor of smoker going into hypnosis like being prodded by the world to go into a dark forest.
Right.
And this dark forest has the reputation of creating zombies.
Right.
And my coach was kind enough to point out that zombies are not so good because of they're it's like dying, but sometimes there are parts of you that just need to die, like cancer.
Ha. So, and that's a very powerful metaphor again, right? In fact, I love it because you're not doing my job for me. We're sitting there going, well, let's give them some reframe and stuff like that. And you're going like, no, we've got them already. Thank you for doing our job for us. There was one over here, and then can we move the mic forward to Rita over there?
Well, I'm a business consultant, and I've always thought, or had an impression, a feeling, that I'm an adult, and my clients are like a kid just playing in sandbox.
Right.
And they are sometimes fighting, grabbing from each other one or another toy, and I'm just looking from the highest perspective down, yeah, and trying to teach them. And now I realize that I should go down and to be together with those kids and play with them, and then the results will occur.
Because you won't have the same kind of resistance with authority and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
You won't have naughty 2-year-olds. You'll have, cooperative ventures. Thank you.
And those kids can only grow up, when you set them free to do so.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Go ahead.
So tomorrow I'll be working with a group of managers who have asked me to think with them about their change management process in the company. So I put myself in the shoes of their employees. And Jewett was very good at pointing out what they would be thinking. So I was going, well, we've done this before, we've traveled down this road, so nothing's new gonna happen.
There's one symbol there, travel down this road before.
So that was the one I was still hooked on. I think, how could I reframe that one so they can appreciate that the new road they're going?
Right. So, people who live in the same place, in the same town, have basically walked every single road at least once. The question is not whether you go down the same road, it's how far you keep going. Right? Because unless you keep going, how will you ever get anywhere else?
You'll never leave town.
Right. Your choice.
Sometimes, of course, we can go down the same, road every day on the way to work in a kind of trance. And then something happens that jars us and wakes it up. And it might be that we suddenly see something beautiful.
For example?
Or, if we're lucky. If we're unlucky, we might crash before we notice what's going on. I don't know.
So, for example, I used to take the same bus to school every single day. Do you see where we're going with this right now? So, I think that's enough food for thought. I think you get the hint about the metaphor and what this meta is for.
And I'd like to reassure you, because I know that you've been very busy for the last 11 days.
Work hard.
It's a long road.
In this seminar and in other ones as well.
And some of you are probably thinking, looking forward to opening that front door and going into
so much stuff
through the room. And really, have you got what it takes to
do I put it all?
Absorb any more information?
The fact is,
we'd like to reassure you
that it is simple.
And this afternoon
will get easier.
And we'll just be doing a few short and easy
fun exercises
to give you the opportunity to consolidate what you've learned
and realize it's quite powerful
and go away with a bit of a bang.
Right. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. How are you guys feeling? Good? We're in the last run, the final run of the day. This is the time to pull out of the bag, get those stories ready, get your engines running, and do something. Are you ready? Dress yourself. There you go. I think he went to the coffee shop today. Don't hold it against him. He just can't handle his drugs. So, start again. How's everyone doing? Yay! Hope you had a nice lunch. And before lunch, we talked about symbolism in terms of people's personal metaphors and how those apply to cultures and so on. So you can understand that you have personal metaphors, we have cultural metaphors that we kind of buy into unconsciously within the groups or social groups that we engage in. And they can be very useful, they can be very helpful for the influence process. Many of you already started to play with the idea of taking the metaphor that's emerged and basically hijacking it, right? So when they're getting stuck with something, Arthur's example is great, the idea of a pressure cooker and you can let off some steam. The concerns come out metaphorically, but not in the office, right? And then you start asking yourself, how can I use this metaphor to actually turn things to a positive event, whether it's how far down the known path you have to tread before you find new ground, the kind you're looking for, right? Or it's reminding them that steam powers railway engines and can get a lot of work done.
Because you need to keep a lid on things for the steam pressure to build up, to have enough pressure to actually get the thing moving. But then steam engines have a governor. They have that little device that spins out as it gets faster and faster. It just lets out steam gradually, just at the right pace. So
and nothing else,
keep the ideal pressure.
They can all start whistling and work, you know. So what I need to do is a very simple exercise now. Is get together with a partner. And now that you've got used to all this kind of language here, see if you can start drawing the metaphors out a little bit more conversationally. So new partner, let's focus on a simple issue, something really light. We don't want to get too heavy right now at the tail end of the training. But really your main job is, once you've got a little bit of the symbolism out, is can you somehow hijack the symbol to make it something more pleasant so it becomes a useful metaphor for change? Does that make sense? The same way we had here, we had with the pathway and so on. Does anyone have any question about that? This is, again, simpler to do than to talk about. So unless these looks are looks of eager anticipation, yeah, I'm really, go for it. So let's take that as a sign that it's time to do an exercise. Please find a partner you haven't talked with yet. A simple, small problem. Spend about a minute or so just chit-chatting to see what symbols pop out. When you get a nice symbol, like I'm stuck or like there's a lot of pressure, then just zero in it and go, what's that kind of like? You know, is it like a banana peel and you slip on it? Huh? No, it's like a pressure cooker. You know, pressure's building up. Once you get it out, reframe it back to them and just see the impact it has. You don't have to go anywhere with it. You just have to see the impact that it has. We'll show you right after this how to use it in a more storytelling context. Okay, guys?
And please do change partners.
Do change partners and change problems and change everything else you want to change. 5 minutes apiece. How'd that go, guys? Who enjoyed that? Hands up. Who is starting to see the value and experience the value of this sort of symbolic way of working with stories as well? Just pass the mic over there.
It's kind of interesting. Me and Warner were talking about problems talking with teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I want to choke that crap out of her and shake her loose. And Warner says, "What do you shake loose?" And I says, "Well, if you look at a fruit tree, you shake it and you get some fruit down." He says, "Well, how about if you take the fruit and give it to her?"
Oh.
So if I just say something nice first and
then you shake the tree. But isn't that nice? How does it make you feel, given that situation when someone says, oh, that's another way of looking at it?
It's interesting. It's kind of showed me that maybe the problem's more mine than somebody else's.
Well, it's interesting often, you know, if you remember the mirror story that I told earlier about the guy and I, well, and the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?
It does not.
You see the mileage you can get out of these things? So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Someone else? Was there a hand over here somewhere? All right. So let's take the next step with this now. I know someone, as a friend of mine who's a salesman, and he had a terrible, terrible time working. He was metaphorically constantly battered and bruised because, you know, going on a sales trip was like going into a war zone for him. He would turn up, he'd battle the clients, sometimes he'd win, sometimes he'd lose. But whether he wins or loses, there's always going to be a little scar to show for the interaction. He'd come back exhausted, either having, exhausted, exhilarated for the sale, or exhausted and depressed at the humiliating defeat. And one day his boss comes in and says, "Look, Brian, I understand why you're making life so hard for yourself. See, what you don't realize is, all the people we're sending out to see, all these potential clients, they need what we have. You're both sitting in the same boat, and someone's got to be willing to pick up the oars and row. So it's up to you. You can fight each other, or you can start rowing. What are you going to start doing?"
Because the thing is, we can't all steer the boat.
Too many cooks spoil the broth? So you get the idea that you can now take those very metaphors that are underlying and start weaving them into your stories so that the transformational moment is actually presented in a story, metaphorically and symbolically at the same time. See how that works? Now, if someone wants to be really clever, here's what you can do with this. Do you remember the picaresque adventure from yesterday? You tell you like a shaggy dog story, or you have a genuine story with lots of little things. Well, you have your loops and your little adventures. What if a side adventure was Brian's sales problem, or whatever other little story you want to throw in there? But then you get back to the main adventure of figuring out what the heck's going on in this monastery. You've just created a very simple, very covert bit of transformation, haven't you? The idea sinks. They go, "Oh, yeah." And before they think about it too much, you carry on with the stories. They go, "Oh, yeah, tell me more about that." And it sits in the back of the mind where it belongs. Because it addresses the very question that someone over here was asking right at the start of the day, which is, if you look at the stories that children read, that you read when you were a child, and you look at your life, aren't you really living the same story out? And the reason you're living it out is because you forgot to think about it. It just became an assumption that you made about life, a symbolic assumption that you recreated. So now we give them a symbolic way of transforming that. Do you understand the idea of this?
Can I just tell a little story?
Well, it's a storytelling seminar, so be my guest.
Thank you. Just on that issue of overt and covert.
Sure.
Because you can use these things directly, and you can also be a bit more subtle. I did one piece of work with a client who was working in a very rule-bound kind of IT department. And he wanted to encourage creativity and to kind of, shake things up a bit, get people to realize that they could step outside the rules they'd created for themselves and be a little more adventurous. And he didn't think that a direct approach would work. So what we ended up doing was we started to collect together newspaper articles, magazines, stories, the kinds of things that were lying around the office, and that you could point at and go, "Oh, and read this story." Kinds of things that you could just leave on a bulletin board and not comment on. And to give you an example of the kind of story we were looking for, there was a newspaper article about a fireman who was being punished. He was being, reprimanded. He was in front of a work tribunal because he disobeyed his line manager during a firefight. This huge building was on fire, and he disobeyed his line manager. And obviously, in that kind of situation, that's a very dangerous, potentially dangerous thing to do. He was reprimanded and fined. And the tribunal pointed out in their judgment that they'd taken into account the fact that going into the building enabled him to save the life of 2 young children who were trapped there. So it was an example of a situation in which breaking the rules was the right thing to do.
Do you get the idea? Can we have a microphone over here, please? Oh, we're now recruiting. I like this. Please take it on.
Your example of converting the war metaphor into a boat seemed a rather abrupt juxtaposition to me. Is that still okay? I thought I would have sort of...
Remember, you're doing this in a story form right now. You can do it more smoothly if you want as well. But because you're doing it in a story form, you're not necessarily going straight like, okay, now that you told me that your relationship feels like a war zone, great. Now, let me tell you a story about someone else who had a relationship that's in the war zone. That's exactly what I'm not suggesting. So you can have a little bit longer to this exercise, precisely because you'll tell a little value story, maybe a little mind-reading story, then maybe a little teaching tale. And one of those may become your picaresque adventure. And inside of that, you don't even talk about necessarily a relationship being like a war zone. You talk about some other event being like a war zone. Yep. The fact that you're using the metaphor, in this case, the relationship is like a war zone, and in the story, it's the salesperson treats it like a war zone. That's the bit where it catches their attention. And if you want, you can then put in like a resolution where you really thought about it, and maybe pops out later on in another picaresque adventure, much happier. And that creates that transition point.
There are a number of ways to go also. Navies take part in wars. During the First World War, horses had to pull together to pull the cannons and the guns forward to the front line.
Fair enough.
So there's many ways you can take it. We're just illustrating how you can take what you just did very directly as a reframe, and you can put it inside of a story. And if you just, let's put it this way, recall yesterday, I mean, today we kind of got a little bit away from storytelling to come back to it. Recall how yesterday you're sitting there at the edge of your seat, really listening to people's stories and getting all excited by them, right? And you probably weren't thinking too much about them other than they're very entertaining. Once you have someone there, that's when you can tell a story, and it becomes a much smoother transition. And then you move on to other parts of the story. Remember the open and closed loops? Once again, that becomes a very useful thing to do there. It's just another way of using a transformational story now that you have tools to build it in a different way. Does that help? Any other questions? All right, guys. So let's spend 6 minutes apiece. Actually, no, let's spend 5 minutes apiece, probably fine. Spend 5 minutes apiece with the same partner. You've already talked a little bit about the metaphor, so you kind of already know where it's going. You don't have to necessarily elicit it now. Just start talking to each other. Tell them a personal story, like a value story, some other thing. And somewhere in the third or fourth story, embed your reframe story, your transformational story, and then finish up your stories in whatever you want. Okay? So it's a 5-minute simple set of stories that you're throwing in, one of which somewhere in the middle will be the one which handles the actual symbol that they gave to you, like the fruit tree, the pressure cooker, and so on. Do you understand the exercise? All right, then. Find a partner. 5 minutes apiece. Off you go.
So in a moment, we're going to do another mingling exercise, and we're going to ask you to move from partner to partner and exchange a little bit of information. And
should we move the chairs first? Or do you want to do it with the chairs? We can do it with the chairs.
And make sure you move around. Make sure you go up to people who you've worked with, people you've spent time with during the last 3 days, last 11 days for some of you, and get a chance with those people to really connect and to share this information. And the kind of information we would like you to share is simply like this. What I liked about, what you did. What I enjoyed about working with you. I loved it when you did that.
And if you want to add a simile along the ways, it's a bit like...
You're some kind of storytelling ninja.
Hi-ya! Now, the important thing here is, you will probably, in your journey around the room, bump into 1 or 2 people you haven't really had an interaction with in terms of stories and so on. You know what you do then? You tell a lie. You pretend you had an amazing time, because let's face it, there is no contradictory evidence.
And I'm sure there will be universal principles, universal experiences that you can draw out. Igor, what I've really enjoyed about working with you is kind of reigniting our rapport on stage. And I love it that we can be a little bit kind of competitive and bantery, and neither of us feel, sulky or, upset about it. I admire your absolute
I was smiling then. What's wrong?
I admire your ability to stay absolutely focused on these guys learning for 11 days in a row, working however 10-hour days or whatever it is. And I really like it when you. I love it when you show your human side, when you laugh, and I think you can be really funny. And there you go.
My ears are red now. Of course, Robin, I have to say, and it's very true, what I really enjoyed is the way that we can interweave the stories and pick up where the other person left off. There's not a lot of people you can actually have that kind of flow with, so that's a real pleasure. As always, I adore your stories. I'm sure these guys will agree with me when I say that just sitting here watching you perform them, it's like theater. It's like, wow, I can sit back, haven't paid for this, I'll just watch. It's phenomenal. And every time I actually see you perform like that, and every time I see you actually train, I actually learn something more myself. It's like going into the smoothie bar, and you can have all the worst things in one drink, only they end up being good for you. And I like that. Hey, it's a private moment.
Thank you. You're welcome.
You get the idea, folks?
So, 10 minutes.
Jakob, could you come up and help? All right, off you go. So how are you guys doing? Did you enjoy that exercise? Yeah. Did you hear some nice things? Dare I say, did a few little stories coming out just because you couldn't help it?
Did anyone get any feedback that surprised them in a nice way?
Yeah?
Excellent.
Very good.
Good.
Well,
I run that exercise, I run that on 4 different continents in corporations, and I always get exactly the same feedback at the end of the session, which is that was the best thing we've done all day, because we never get a chance to do that in our work.
Yeah.
That's just a little tip for you consultants.
So we're coming to the tail end of the day now. You guys have worked hard. I know you've worked a lot of things. And as with most things, when you come to ends of an important journey, usually, people like to leave you with a last thought, idea, or image. I'd like to do the latter. I'd like to leave you with one very important idea that hopefully you'll take with you when we finish here. And the idea comes more in the form of an image. If you imagine a monastery or an abbey on the top of a hill, and inside there somewhere is a crypt. And if you follow a long series of tunnels, you'll get to a door. And behind that door lie all the stories you never told. I think it's time to open that door, don't you?
I started off talking about a windmill that I bought for my mum. And when I came over here, I was wondering how I could keep in touch with my daughter while I was over here. And just kind of relate, how do I get her to relate to the experience that's going on? So Paddington Bear smuggled himself into my suitcase. And I've got photos of him peeking his head out of the suitcase, looking out of the airplane window. Me being surprised to find him in the hotel room. Us cuddled up in bed together like this. Him on a bicycle in Amsterdam by the canal. Sipping a beer by a famous bridge. Training with Igor Ledochowski.
Why, thank you for...
Thank
you very much.
And I also told you a story about a picture frame. And for me, that story really encapsulated very simply the power, the real power of story. Because it's just a picture frame, right? It's just, I don't know, a few dollars. But the story attached to it makes it priceless. So, on that note, it's time to close your book and close the book on this training.
It's usually easiest to do with flat feet on the floor.
And with your hands positioned comfortably, perhaps on your laps.
Eyes closed usually enhance an experience.
It doesn't matter whether you take a deep breath in right now
or simply relax
and allow your breathing to happen naturally.
As your thoughts circulate naturally from
As
one
you feel
lazy idea to another.
Your breathing changing now.
And there's so many things you've experienced.
Let your attention play.
So many stories you've told.
Only on those most pleasant sensations.
So many stories you've heard.
Those feelings of relaxation and comfort.
You've been touched.
In a deep way.
And moved.
And you can still feel the weight of your body on the chair.
By all the experiences.
And you can feel the temperature
that others have shared with you.
On your skin.
In the form of story.
You can hear the sounds in the room.
And there's that woman. Story. And truth.
And you can review the experience of the last 3 days.
Making one more palatable to the general population.
And you can imagine
important truths.
Whether you're sitting
coming
in
from your
that
story
chair
of who you are
or another chair,
what you value. And there are so many different ways to experience comfort.
That chair
could be any chair in the world.
Could be an armchair.
It could be a rocking chair.
Could be a throne.
It could be something you've sat in many times before.
Or it could be a chair you've only sat in once.
If you sat in a chair,
in a house,
in a clearing,
in a wood,
and waited comfortably,
waiting for somebody to come and visit you,
an important task,
a story to tell,
something that only that individual needs to hear.
And they've traveled on a long journey,
a long way to be here,
to find you waiting for them.
And there they are by the doorstep,
here,
walking in the room, sitting down and looking at you expectantly
as you begin
the story
to tell them
what they need to hear
right now
in the cloak of story.
And whether it's a long story or a short story,
you have all the time you need.
Whether it's the seed of
in
a
the
story
next few moments,
or the completion
to expand time inside
of something left open,
to make it fit.
It's a story that's really important.
The exact
for you
story
to
you're
hear.
telling. And notice the emotion. Feel how your words touch that person.
Hear the sound of your own voice.
Change them.
As you tell that story,
freeze their own voice.
Using all the new skills you've learned.
Freeze their own movements.
See the impact it has on them.
Releases the stories trapped inside.
Feel that connection between you both growing there together.
And you've done so many things now.
Have you not?
You've achieved so much now.
And you've learnt.
And you can achieve even more. As a story finishes, a bigger one begins.
And it's a story you may know the beginning.
Far away from a house in a clearing, in a forest. There is another life.
Another place.
That awaits someone.
And you all know the way home, don't you?
There are so many things that await you. And the stories you have to tell.
And as you travel,
will you experience it on a plane or a train?
On a car or a boat?
A bus or a bicycle?
As you continue on your journey,
collecting stories and sharing them.
What diversions and detours will you take?
Who will you meet?
In the airport?
Who will you tell a story to?
In a cafe?
How will you know what story needs to be told next?
At work?
When something occurs.
At home?
And a person simply has a need to hear a story.
You'll know.
that you have
just the story
to share now.
that they need.
A lifetime awaits you.
A lifetime, and we don't know how it ends.
We don't know where it's going to go.
We only know the journey continues.
It's full of stories.
And that story unfolds
every moment.
forever. Each of our individual
every
stories,
beating of your heart,
interweaving and
every dream you have,
and
every
each
obstacle
of us, each person
you
meet
confront,
is the hero in their own
every
story.
person you meet,
and make sure you're
every river you
the
cross,
hero in your own story.
Every goal you achieve,
because if you're not taking
every person you help,
authority for that journey,
or simply just sharing a good moment,
and who is
with another human being,
and now you know so much more.
And you can sit in any chair in the world.
You could be sitting in an armchair.
You could be sitting on a throne.
You could be sitting on a chair in a training room.
You could be sitting right at home.
Or you could be sitting right there in that chair.
In an office or a plane.
Feeling the weight of your body on that chair.
And knowing that there's a story to be told.
And getting ready now
to bring it all together.
Only as quickly
as all that rests inside you now.
And as you take a nice deep breath,
your eyes can open,
taking that feeling with you,
and you can look on the world
as you open your eyes
as a true storyteller now.
When you're ready to do so.
And doesn't the world look a little different like this?
You'll have just a new view and a new perspective.
And that's really where stories come from, isn't it?
And it's been fascinating to share this journey over the last 3 days. I've had a wonderful time.
I have too. Thank you, Robin.
You rock, mate.
So you do?
Thank you.
And as with most things, neither one of us could have done any of this if this room was empty. So I could have done, but it would have been nowhere near as much fun. So I want to thank all of each of you for really participating, throwing yourself in. I know it's not been easy at times, and it's been a lot of energy required of you. We've seen you really transform. Your stories have become fantastic. And I want you guys to appreciate yourselves and each other for becoming the storytellers that you've become. So give yourselves a round of applause, guys.
And just in case we forget, the assistants at the back there.
All these fine people without whom.
Megan especially, our camera crew.
Our
Tom
camera right
Martin.
here, who's captured every word for you.
Thank you.
Of course, we have our all-important sound engineers, without whom you would have heard nothing. I think the last clap of all should be to all the people that you'll be telling stories to thank them in advance for listening and sharing a moment with you.
Yay.
Okay, guys, this story is over. Now go home and find some new ones.